Hello, and today I'm going to talk about one of the most beloved horror classics of all time, The Exorcist. And yeah, it seems fitting. The Exorcist is one of the most revolutionary horror films of the genre. The Exorcist went into areas that no other mainstream horror film at the time had ever gone. While Night of the Living Dead had gone to areas that no horror film had gone before, it was an independent movie. The Exorcist was a mainstream film that was produced by Warner Brothers. And the film itself at this point is just legendary. Just about every horror film that deals with demonic possession or the devil or something supernatural in some way was inspired by or is ripping off or paying homage to The Exorcist. And it's also one of the highest grossing films of all time. When it first came out, The Exorcist was called the scariest film of all time, and even today people will say that it is one of the scariest films they've ever seen, and it terrified them and shocked them like most films haven't. And I think The Exorcist is an amazing film that has stood the test of time, and everybody should at least check it out once. And yeah, there are probably some people that are going to be turned off by its content, but at the same time, any true lover of horror will love it and just be fascinated. And I find The Exorcist to be a very fascinating film. I will say this, I do not think The Exorcist is the scariest movie I have ever seen. I have seen a lot of scary films, and I think it's kind of a thing of the time, because as I said, no real movie had ever gone as far as The Exorcist had gone. So at the time, people were new to this kind of stuff, and it definitely shocked them and scared them. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just feel like there have been scarier films about the devil or demonic possession that have scared me, like John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, which I think is one of the greatest horror films dealing with the subject of the devil ever made. And The Exorcist, as a horror film, it is just phenomenally made. It was directed by William Friedkin, who at the time was one of the hottest directors in Hollywood. He had just made The French Connection with Gene Hackman and had won the Oscar for Best Director on that film. And The Exorcist was his next film after that. And many people say that with William Friedkin, they feel that after those two amazing, groundbreaking films, that he never lived up to the success of them. And they're right. He made a lot of films that got praise, but none of them were ever as successful as The French Connection or The Exorcist. And I haven't seen every film by William Friedkin, but every film I have seen by him, I have really thought was good or loved. And some of the films that have gotten the most flack that were made by him, I really enjoy. Cruising with Al Pacino. Yeah, believe it or not, I really like Cruising. I think it's a great murder mystery thriller. Al Pacino gives a good performance, and it has a dark grittiness that you don't see in most mainstream movies, even back then or even today. And I don't see it as insulting or homophobic as critics of the time did when it first came out. And it had a lot to give, and if I ever talk about Cruising in a full review, I'll go into more detail. And William Friedkin, after The Exorcist, he didn't really direct any more horror films until 1990 when he made The Guardian. And The Guardian, it is a bit absurd, and one thing William Friedkin is best known for is that he tries to make his movies as realistic as possible. And that's something that The Exorcist does really well. It feels like real life at times, like the characters, the way the actors, the way they play their roles, the way they talk and act. It feels like real people, and the idea of what would happen if this kind of stuff actually happened in real life. The Guardian is a bit more out there. It isn't as totally realistic. It can be a little silly at times, and it really goes balls out crazy. But I feel like it's not on par with The Exorcist, but if you loved The Exorcist 3, then you will love The Guardian. And then there is what is considered to be William Friedkin's most despised movie, Jade. And I saw the theatrical cut of Jade first, and I will admit, it has a horrible ending. The editing's a bit off and it's confusing. But then I got the director's cut, and the director's cut makes it just a terrific film, another great murder mystery, and it has a lot of very well done erotica to go with it. So yeah, I think William Friedkin is a pretty good director, very talented. And I actually saw Cruising in Jade before I saw The Exorcist, and I thought, if those are considered his worst, I can't wait to see what is considered his best. And I think I've talked enough about William Friedkin, so... For those who don't know what The Exorcist is about, it stars Ellen Burstyn as a actress named Chris McNeil, who's in Georgetown shooting a movie, and she has her 12-year-old daughter Reagan with her, played by Linda Blair, who actually was 12 at the time of filming. And through mostly unexplained circumstances, Reagan becomes possessed by a demon, and as time goes on, her personality begins to change and become nastier and more vile and more violent and just terrifying, and many things start happening that are not possible. And at first Chris tries going to medical doctors and eventually psychologists and psychiatrists to figure out what's wrong with her, and nothing that these people find can explain what the problem is. And eventually it comes to she is so desperate to help her daughter that she tries going to a priest to perform an exorcism. And that leads to the film's big climax where two priests, one who has had experience in exorcism and one who I guess you could call a rookie priest in this area, try to exorcise Reagan and drive the demon out of her. And going back to what I said about how I don't see The Exorcist as the scariest horror movie of all time, but I do find it to be a fascinating horror film, because even though it doesn't scare me as much as some other horror films have, it is unnerving, and it does create a lot of suspense. And overall, I guess the best way to describe The Exorcist is, when I watch it, I don't exactly see it 100% as a horror film. I mean, it is a horror film, but when I watch The Exorcist, I kind of see it more as a drama. And let me explain. Throughout the film, we see many complex characters who are either broken or struggling emotionally, or and a major theme is that Chris McNeil, as she watches her daughter's determent as she is possessed, she just becomes horrifying, and physically Reagan, her skin and the way she looks begins to become more rotted looking. Like she really looks like a monster. And Ellen Burstyn, I haven't seen all of her work, but just from The Exorcist, I feel like she gave an amazing performance, and she was nominated for an Academy Award for The Exorcist, and I agree, she completely deserved that nomination, because the character of Chris McNeil, I feel, is one of the best mother characters I have seen, because she's she has a lot of issues. Whenever she is around adults, she talks with them as an adult would, and she has stress, she has a temper, but when she's with her daughter, she tries to be caring and loving, and she does love her daughter. And you can tell when you watch it that Chris is trying to shield Reagan away from the harshness of reality. And when she sees her daughter start to be taken over, she just begins to lose it. Chris begins to break down. And you can see it not only through her performance, where she goes from a sort of tight-assed but caring mother to being just emotionally distraught, and physically, as the film reaches its third act, she just looks so exhausted and tired, like she's losing hope and she doesn't know what to do anymore after taking Reagan to all the doctors and trying to find a logical reason. Because at first, when they go to the hospital, they think it might be a lesion in the brain. And after doing many x-rays and doing a exam that requires them putting a needle in her neck, which by the way is pretty unnerving. Like, to many people, this scene in the hospital where they run the tests on Reagan and it requires them to stick the needle in her, to many people that is more disturbing than the possession scenes. And the doctors can't find anything, and they keep trying to figure out a reason for it. And when they go to psychiatrists, and something I've noticed from a lot of older films is that it's a little questionable when they call certain characters psychiatrists, because there's a difference between psychiatrists and psychologists. A psychiatrist is someone you talk to and they prescribe you medication to help you get better. A psychologist is someone you talk to in sessions, but they don't prescribe medication. And it's not a major bother for me because it is an older film, but at the same time, I'm someone who goes to therapy, so something in movies that really will set me off is when I see therapy, psychology, misrepresented or portrayed irresponsibly. I don't really think it went that way in The Exorcist, but just something I wanted to bring up. And the psychiatrist characters, they can't find any reason, and when they are out of ideas on how to treat Reagan when it seems like nothing is working, they suggest that the mother have an exorcism, saying, and I don't understand all of it fully. I mean, I do go to therapy, but I don't have a degree in psychology, so I don't understand the whole thing. And they talk about the idea that someone who is not well mentally and who have religious beliefs, that sometimes they can become paranoid. I think this is what they said in the movie, and that having an exorcism could quell their paranoia. And basically, The Exorcist is an atheist's worst nightmare, where fact and logic can't be found to explain something, and the characters have to come to accept that the demonic possession is real. And going back to Chris, I love this character. She is not perfect, and she has troubles, and she breaks down, but in my opinion, she acts exactly like any real parent would in a situation like this. And she loves her daughter, and she puts everything behind getting her better, including herself. And in my opinion, that is what a real parent does for their child. They do whatever they can to help them, and I just think she's a great mother, this character, and there is one scene in the beginning of Reagan's possession where she acts out in front of Chris's friends or peers, and Chris quickly leads her off and is shocked, but that's not the worst that could have happened, and in the end I think Chris McNeil is a great character. Ellen Bernstein did a fantastic job, and I don't know what else more I could say about how much I like how this character goes about everything as the events unfold. And now on to Linda Blair's performance. Linda Blair, as I mentioned, she was 12 years old when she made The Exorcist, and this role required a lot from her. She had to really act, and it is hard for child actors to act. And I think I haven't seen any other film she did when she was a child at this point, but I feel she did a great job, and she totally feels like a real kid. There are a few scenes where she acts a little cutesy and annoying, but not to an unrealistic extent. Like, there are a lot of kids that will be annoying and what they think is cute, or them thinking what is funny. And Linda Blair, she totally feels like a real kid in this film. Like, acts like a real kid, talks like a real kid. And then there came the scenes where she is possessed, and she really had to swear a lot. "Stick your cock up her ass, you motherfucking worthless cocksucker!" I know everybody who has seen The Exorcist knows that line, but it is just worth repeating. And an important thing to know is, while Linda Blair did say all those lines during the filming of the movie, the demonic voice that she speaks in during the possession scenes is not hers. And the actress who did the voice of the demon is Mercedes McCambridge. And at the time The Exorcist came out, Linda Blair was nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars before anyone knew that the majority of her role was dubbed. And believe me, Mercedes McCambridge was pissed. And the Academy, at the time, their guidelines said that once a nomination had been announced, they couldn't take it back. So the deal was Linda Blair could keep the nomination, but she wasn't going to win. Which I think is fair, and Linda Blair, in the end, she does a good job. The scenes where it's her natural voice, she conveys a lot of good emotion, and even when her voice is dubbed, she still had to make the evil faces. She still had to act angry and furious and just come off as evil. And she does a very good, convincing job. And Mercedes McCambridge as the voice of... Another fact to know is the demon that possesses Reagan, it's never identified by name throughout the film, but later movies, and it's been confirmed by the writer of the movie and the novel that The Exorcist is based on, the demon's name is Pazuzu. And people have often said that they think it's a stupid name, and that you can't take the possession part seriously when you know that the demon's name is Pazuzu. And personally, I don't get all the heat that the name Pazuzu gets, because there have been a lot of silly names in religion. Might I remind you that there are religions who call their gods Muhammad and Krishna? So, yeah, I don't think Pazuzu is the silliest name that you could have chosen. And something that's really impressive to add to Mercedes McCambridge's performance is that you could never tell that Linda Blair was dubbed for this movie. Like, it totally sounds like it's happening in the moment as she's speaking. Like, perfect syncing of the lips and the way it sounds, the audio. And The Exorcist won the Oscar for Best Sound. And that's another thing it definitely deserved, because you totally feel like this is all coming from just this little girl. And when she becomes possessed, the possessed Reagan, well, I said The Exorcist doesn't totally scare me as it did most people when it came out. In the latter part of the film, especially during the climax, the rotted look and makeup and face of Reagan mixed with that voice, as I said, it does create a tense, unnerving feel to it. So, Mercedes McCambridge as the voice of Pazuzu and Linda Blair as Reagan, they both did a fantastic job. And like William Friedkin, Linda Blair never really lived up to the success of The Exorcist. I've seen a few of her movies after The Exorcist, and a bunch of films that she did after The Exorcist were more exploitive and not as well made. And she did return for Exorcist 2: The Heretic. And I'm gonna say this, I do think The Exorcist is one of the greatest horror films, one of the greatest films ever made. But Exorcist 2: The Heretic, I loathe that movie. I've seen the Nostalgia Critic and the Cinema Snob make fun of it on their shows, but me personally, Exorcist 2 is possibly one of the worst films I have ever seen in my fucking life. I hate it. I hated watching it. All it did was make me furious, and it just was a huge knife in the testicles to anyone who loved the first movie. And if you can't tell, this is the Exorcist complete anthology box set, and Exorcist 2 is included here. And so far I've seen the first three. I haven't gotten to the beginning or Dominion prequels, but Exorcist 2, when I saw this, I didn't think it could be that. I mean, I always go into a movie, ever since The Dark Knight let me down, whenever I go watch a movie for the first time, whether it's considered good or bad by most people, I don't go in expecting something great, and I don't go in expecting something terrible. I just expect it to play, and I will get my opinion as I watch it. And Exorcist 2, the less said about that piece of shit, the better. And I will probably review that sometime in the future, but I got a feeling it will be one of my harshest reviews, and I don't like getting too harsh. Before I get on to the rest of the cast, I have a few more facts I'd like to mention about Linda Blair and The Exorcist. This is a story I read, and like every story, it could not be true, but this is a story I feel that is so good it had to have been true, because if not, it would be a huge fucking letdown. When Linda Blair was auditioning for The Exorcist, apparently William Friedkin explained to her just what was expected of her and how mature the movie would be. And he told her that the role would require her to swear, and that during the scenes of her being possessed. And this is one of the most controversial scenes from The Exorcist. A scene where Reagan takes a crucifix and she just people say that it's her masturbating with the crucifix, just stabbing it into her vagina, and it leads to a lot of blood. And personally, I feel it could be very easy to have the fact that it's a masturbation scene go over your head. During the scene, Reagan screams "fuck me" or "fuck Jesus," but at the same time, it didn't come off as much as what I heard about the scene, and it is very disturbing and very grisly. Then Reagan grabs her mother and just forces her face into her vagina, yelling, "Lick me! Lick me!" And when I saw that, it just made the shock levels in me go up. Because, yeah, holy shit. I don't think you would see that in a lot of movies, even over the years and today. Like, I don't think most movies would go that extreme, like, to this, especially in this kind of scenario. So yeah, as I said, The Exorcist went areas that most mainstream films wouldn't go before, and it's one of many things to admire and respect. It just how much balls it had. Anyway, back to what I was originally getting into. William Friedkin told Linda Blair that the movie would require her to have a scene where she's masturbating, and since she was 12, he was being cautious, asking her, "Do you understand what that is?" And Linda Blair was 12. She answered, "Yeah, it's like jerking off, right?" And William Friedkin, apparently he asked, "Do you know what that is?" And she answered, "Yes." And then he asked, "Have you ever tried that?" And she said, "Hasn't everybody?" Sometimes kids know more than you give them credit for. And after The Exorcist came out, religious zealots, fundamentalists, just real Jesus freak nuts, they thought the film, according to what I read, glorified Satan. And I don't know how they could get that. Yes, it's about a girl being possessed, but in the end, it's about people trying to drive the demon out of her, so, yeah. And Linda Blair received death threats from these religious zealots, and it became so bad that Warner Brothers provided bodyguard protection for her, and I think for about a year after the movie came out, her family, along with family friends, had to carefully move her around in order to keep her safe. Yikes. Oh, and famous evangelist Billy Graham thought there was an actual demon living in the celluloid reels for the movie. So I read on IMDb. And, he's about a quarter right. Throughout the film, there are several subliminal flashes of what is supposed to be the devil's face, I think. That's what everybody who sees this face says it is. And they happen so quick and so fast that if you blink, you'll miss it. Like anyone who's seen Fight Club will kind of get what I'm talking about. The face is, yeah, pretty shocking, like it just makes you jump a little. Or as I said, if you blink, you probably will just miss it. You have to pay close attention to the movie to really catch it. And the look and makeup is so good that it was my inspiration for this spooky intro that I've decided to do for the month of October. And the last fact about the devil's face, it is an actress named Eileen Dietz, and from what I read, it was the look of the devil in those flashes were early makeup tests for what they were considering doing for Linda Blair. The next main character in the film is Father Damien Karras, played by Jason Miller, another actor who has sadly passed away. he wasn't that old when he died, and he actually didn't do that many films. And like most of the actors in this film, he was also nominated for a Oscar for his performance. And like Ellen Burstyn, Jason Miller gives a fantastic performance where he has to work a lot of emotions and transitioning of character as far as the emotional struggles that he's going through. And his character, Father Damien Karras, is a priest who is also a licensed psychiatrist, and he is the priest that Chris McNeil goes to when she starts trying to find someone who can perform an exorcism. And Father Karras, when he hears about Reagan, he doesn't immediately believe her, and he doesn't immediately go to that this girl is possessed by a demon or the devil. He at first thinks that she is just emotionally troubled and she has a mental condition, and until he becomes convinced that she is possessed, he tries to talk to her on a therapeutic level. And this is something that I really liked about this part of the film, because most of the priests in this movie, especially Karras, they are, in my opinion, some of the most humanized priest characters that I've ever seen in a movie. And yes, there have been sympathetic priest characters in movies before The Exorcist came out, but I don't think ever to this level, because the character Father Karras, his character has just recently lost his mother, and he is emotionally distraught and still healing from it. And he's also losing his faith in God, and he just doesn't feel like he can be a priest anymore. And I can totally see it, because this character, he is just very vulnerable, and he's struggling, and he's thinking not like a priest or a religious figure. He's thinking like a normal person. And throughout the film I kept thinking, he should really just be a normal guy. He should have a normal life where he wouldn't have to live in this kind of job and deal with the kind of stuff he has to deal with. And I thought, yeah, he was one of the most sympathetic priest characters I've seen, and if anyone has seen my Passion of the Christ review, you will know that I have a lot of issues with religion in general. Like, it's not just certain religions, it's just religions all over. And people like fundamentalists and people who use religion to justify their prejudiced beliefs and also to act on things without thinking about it. And something I really love about The Exorcist is it gives us rational thinking religious people. And I just think that was pretty cool. It was unique, and it's unique to me now, so imagine how it was to audiences back in 1973. Yeah. So Jason Miller, he gives so much to this character and creates a very sympathetic role, and in the end a very tragic role. Like, for example, I'm gonna have to put the spoiler card up. When I mean tragic, I have to go back to the beginning. It's never really delved into why Reagan has become possessed, and the only hint that we have is that the house that she and her mother are living in has a Ouija board, and Reagan says she's been playing with it and that she has gotten a friend who her mother thinks is just an imaginary friend, and the Ouija board, apparently that thing you put on it, I've never played with a Ouija board, and that thing you put on it just moves on its own. And that's the only hint as to why the possession is happening, that the Ouija board caused it. And I guess I could see this as one of the weaker elements, but it's not really dwelled on too much, so it doesn't really hurt the film. But yeah, the Ouija board, I just wanted to mention this part. It just seems like one of the sillier things to use as an explanation. I like to think of it more as there's never really an explanation given as to why she becomes possessed. I like that idea more. As I was saying about Father Karras being a tragic character, when he goes to see Reagan for the first time, and later when the exorcism is happening and he's questioning why this demon would choose Reagan of all people, in the first meeting he has with her, the demon says to Karras, "It'll bring us closer together." And he says, "You and Reagan?" And then it says, "You and us." And this leads me to think that in some way, even though it's not really explained too much, maybe Reagan wasn't the person that Pazuzu was going after. Maybe in the end it was Karras. And as I said, it's never really delved into too much. It's mostly up to how you interpret it. But that's how I interpret it. And it just seems like the character, Father Karras, he's just a poor unfortunate man that has a lot of unfairness inflicted upon him. And now on to the most famous character from The Exorcist, next to Reagan, Father Merrin, played by the legendary actor Max von Sydow. And Max von Sydow, he is the favorite actor of a very good friend of mine, Mike Sintros. He's the guy I put all the plugs for at the end of my videos. And in Mike's opinion, Max von Sydow is an actor that can bring something to any movie he's in, even if the movie itself is bad. A good example would be Judge Dredd. But anyway, back to The Exorcist. Even though his character is the character in the title, The Exorcist, Father Merrin is only in the movie for, I would think, less than 20 minutes, or just about that length. And Father Merrin, he is in the very first scene of The Exorcist, which, surprisingly, yeah, it opens in the last place you'd expect a movie like The Exorcist to open. Iraq. The film opens with Father Merrin at a archaeologist dig in Iraq, and while digging through what looks like a buried tomb or civilization, he encounters a little statue that is based on Pazuzu, and it instills a lot of fear in him. And you get the feeling that he is feeling that something bad is going to happen. Like he knows more about this than most of the priests do. And it's established that most of these priests don't know much about exorcisms, but Father Merrin does, and later stories and movies would... It's later revealed that Father Merrin, when he arrives to help Father Karras in performing the exorcism, that he has fought Pazuzu in the past. And Pazuzu, at one point before they fight him, screams Merrin's name. And like a lot of things in The Exorcist, this storyline is not delved into too deeply, but it is there, and it just creates that thing where you have a little mystery, and although not everything is resolved by the end, it does give you a little insight. And Father Merrin, unlike Father Karras, has a lot of faith. And during the exorcism, he just stays completely focused and doesn't break, and he doesn't give up in trying to cast out the demon. And Father Karras, and this once again shows that he is just too human and normal and to be a priest, in my opinion. He just breaks a few times and Pazuzu gets the better of him. But in the end, Father Karras tries all he can to save Reagan. And this leads to the famous part where Karras and Merrin make the cross sign. I don't know if I'm doing that right. And they just wave at Reagan as she just flails and sways, and Pazuzu tries to resist. They yell, "The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!" And they just repeat it over and over. It's a powerful, emotional scene. You just get fully invested. The whole exorcism scene is just so intense. It just brings and creates so much drama and horror and awe, and it's so well done, so well shot. And the creepiest image in the whole film is during the big exorcism scene, where we see what appears to be a statue of Pazuzu and the possessed Reagan looking up to it, and there's this giant kind of ambient light flashing out of nowhere, and Karras and Merrin just stare at it in horror and bewilderment. And now I'm going to talk about the movie's ending. The way The Exorcist ends is a little confusing. I mean, in the end, Reagan, Pazuzu is cast out of her, but it's questionable if it's actually cast out. Merrin and Karras perform the exorcism, like the first part, I think, or their first attempt, and then Karras, after not being able to handle the stress, goes in to save her, and he finds Father Merrin lying on the bed next to Reagan dead, and Reagan, still possessed, is sitting there staring at him. And then Karras, and this is a part that still questions many people. When Father Karras comes in and finds Merrin dead, many people wonder, did Reagan kill Father Merrin? Or, earlier in his opening scene and partway through the exorcism scene, Merrin is seen taking some pills while shaking as he does so, implying that he has a health condition. So, during this scene where Karras finds Merrin dead, the big question is, did Merrin die of a heart attack, or did Reagan in some way physically kill him? I mean, the whole situation is terrifying enough. He probably would get a heart attack, but it's a big questioning scene. And after finding him, Karras tries to perform CPR on Merrin, but it is obvious that he is completely dead and there is nothing that he can do. And then Reagan starts laughing evilly, and Karras, in anger, attacks her and yells at the demon, "Leave her! Come into me! Come into me!" And then Pazuzu actually does leave Reagan and goes into Karras. and Karis, to avoid Pazuzu causing any more harm, jumps out of the bedroom window, sacrificing himself. And in the end, I think it's confusing. Did the exorcism work? And also, could Pazuzu just leave? Or did the exorcism when they first performed it, did that have some effect? And it doesn't. This is not bad, just it's really confusing, and I don't dwell on it too much because in the end, The Exorcist is a great, incredible film. I just can't understand that part because I really question whether or not the exorcism actually worked. And I feel like I need to wrap this up, so I'm just going to say a few more things. As to the whole, did Reagan kill Marin or did Marin die of a heart attack? Like a lot of people, I have no way of telling for sure what happened. But if I had to lean towards something, my theory would be Marin died of a heart attack and Reagan, sitting on the bed the way she is, staring at Marin and then laughing at Karis. I think it's just the demon's way of fucking with Karis and making him think that it had something to do with his death. There's no way to verify, but that's the theory I'm leaning towards. And the way the movie ends is very ominous, and it opens the door for something more to happen, but at the same time, it could just end there. And given the mess of the sequels, it's a little half and half. As I said, I hate Exorcist 2, but as for Exorcist 3, that is a great film, but it still has a few flaws. And the only other character that is important enough to mention is Lieutenant William Kinderman, a policeman who's investigating the death of one of Chris McNeil's Hollywood friends, whose death was caused by Reagan. And the character only has a couple of scenes, and apparently he was bigger in the novel. But the character, he is pretty much a normal guy. He's a cop. And Lieutenant Kinderman, I guess the best way to describe him is he's a dick, but he cares and all he wants to do is find the truth, and he has an idea of what happened, but he has no way to verify it. And whether or not he believes in the possession part is up to debate. And the actor who plays him, Lee J. Cobb, does a great job. And Lee J. Cobb, he was in The Exorcist about 3 years before he died, and it's a small character, and I guess he has what little comedic element there is to The Exorcist. Like a few scenes, they'll make you laugh as kind of a breather during the more disturbing and scary scenes. And the character Kinderman would later become the main character in The Exorcist 3. And it's interesting because in the first movie he plays such a little part, but he's still a part of the film, and the way his character's arc ends, you don't really know what's going to happen. Like, he didn't play a major part in the events in the film, but you feel like if the story was going to continue, it would feature him. And eventually it did, because in Exorcist 3, it basically picks up a few years after the last film, showing his character still dealing with what happened, and getting a further exposure to the demonic possessions that he just narrowly missed in this film. That is all the major characters of The Exorcist, and This has been great talking about it. I think The Exorcist is a great, well-made film. It stands out not only as a horror film, but as a drama, as a landmark of cinema, and it should be seen by everybody who stomachs the grisly stuff. The last few quick things I'm going to mention before I end this are William Peter Blatty, who wrote the novel, also wrote the screenplay for The Exorcist, and he actually won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. And next to Best Sound, these were the only Oscars that The Exorcist won, and despite himself winning, William Peter Blatty blasted the Oscars, saying that they really didn't know what was good. Seems like might have a bit of an ego there. And a fun fact, William Peter Blatty wrote The Exorcist after winning $10,000 on the 1950s game show You Bet Your Life, which was hosted by the legendary comedian Groucho Marx. He said that he was gonna work on a novel after he won the big prize on the show. William Peter Blatty would continue working in a few movies, not a lot, but a few, after The Exorcist, and next to screenwriting, he also directed 2 movies. And the second film he directed, and the last one as of late, was The Exorcist 3, which I will get into at another point. Before I jump out of here, the last 2 things to mention are the makeup effects in The Exorcist were done by Dick Smith, the Academy Award-winning makeup artist who won for Amadeus and did the makeup work for the Godfather movies and Taxi Driver. And his assistant for The Exorcist was also now legendary makeup artist Rick Baker. Yeah. And last but not least, and I swear this is the last one, The Exorcist is Kane Hodder's favorite movie. Who's Kane Hodder? Well, he played Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 7, Part 8, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, and Jason X. He has very good taste. It's been great.